The dogs and the cats and the monkeys are a lot like you. The chickens and the cows and the geese, they're a lot like me. We all just want to be. We all just want to be. We all just want to live happy and free. Hello and welcome once again to Animals Have Rights. Well, let's see. There's a lot in the news that we're going to talk about this week. Maybe less than some weeks, more than others. This is from the Wisconsin State Journal. This was published on Friday, May 22nd, 2009, so this is probably coming a little bit after that fact. The title says of this very small article, it says, Oncology Chairman Named. Dr. James Shull has been named Chairman of Oncology and of the McArdle Laboratory for Cancer Research at UW-Madison. Shull, Chairman of Genetics at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, will replace Dr. Norman Drinkwater, blah, 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 who's going to step down. So it's sort of interesting. It says the McArdle Lab, which focuses on basic science research, is part of the UW's Paul P. Carbone's Comprehensive Cancer Center, which is directed by George Wilding. My mother died of cancer. Cancer is a hideous disease. If any of you have had a loved one or a friend or who've gone through the just very tough times with cancer, then I'm sure you'll agree with that. I've known 3 cats who've died of cancer, whose pain became so intractable that, in fact, they were killed because they couldn't control the pain. In fact, I personally killed all 3 of those cats because their pain became so bad and there weren't drugs adequate to control their pain. So whenever I see an article on cancer, it catches my eye. And so when I noticed the guy's name, James Shull, I wonder what sort of research James Shull does. Maybe he's got something, maybe there's a reason that they're bringing him to the University of Wisconsin. Maybe he's going to do something really good for people, patients throughout the state, maybe throughout the country who are suffering from cancer. Before I tell you what he does, let me just tell you what somebody who was the National Cancer Institute is part of the National Institute of Health. And a past director, a fairly well-known scientist named Dr. Richard Klausner, in 1989 said in the LA Times, and I quote, "The history of cancer research has been the history of curing cancer in the mouse. We have cured mice of cancer for decades, and it simply didn't work in humans." He easily could have said, Klausner could easily have included rats or other animals because no animal model of cancer has done very much for treatments, cancer treatments in humans. So this is sort of interesting. James Shull, I started to find out a little bit about him. And it turns out that, well, I think one of the reasons they might be bringing him to Wisconsin is the fact that he brings with him just over $2 million worth of grants. Now, all of his work, as far as I can tell, looking at his entire publishing history, all of his work has to do with inducing rats with mammary cancer. This is apparently his big thing. His big discovery, let me read from his website. A primary focus of our laboratory is to establish novel, that means brand new, never seen them before, genetically defined and physiologically relevant animal models. Of course, none of the animal models have done anything for studying human cancer, so I'm not sure how relevant they are. But they're trying to develop relevant animal models for the study of breast cancer. A few years ago, here's his claim to fame, we provided the first demonstration that the female ACI rat, that's a particular strain of rat, exhibits a genetically conferred propensity to develop mammary cancer when treated with the naturally occurring estrogen, 17B estradiol. In contrast, now here's his big discovery, Copenhagen and brown Norway rat strains are resistant to the same estrogen. So because of that discovery, of course, we're bringing him here to run become the oncology chairman. So it's bad news for rats, and it's, of course, just more bad news for people who are destined to get cancer or currently have cancer. Also in the news, let me just jump ahead here a little bit. Here at the University of Wisconsin, a study published on PLOS biology. PLOS is a public library of science. Papers published on PLOS are open and available to the public. This is a paper published in 2009, and the title of the paper is "Empathy is Moderated by Genetic Background in Mice." So what they did was they studied mice. Some of the mice they subjected to electric shocks, and the other mice who were listening or watching, they learned that they were bothered. They reacted negatively to other mice being hurt. So that's a breakthrough, isn't it? Let me see. Another breakthrough here in the news recently. This was from Forbes magazine. There's just been a paper come out that explains why chimpanzees and monkeys don't develop Alzheimer's. They really don't know why they don't, but this is an interesting thing. It said that scientists have long noticed a curious phenomena among primates. Humans get the devastating neurological disorder known as Alzheimer's disease, but their closest evolutionary cousins don't. Even more inexplicable is the fact that chimpanzees and other non-human primate brains do get clogged with the same protein plaques that are believed by many to cause the disease in humans. What this tells us, first of all, is that plaques are structurally distinct in humans versus non-human primates, said study author Rebecca Rosen. She's at the Yerkes National Primate Research Center, a sister facility of the Wisconsin Primate Center here in Madison. But the true significance, when it comes to treating or preventing the disease, remains unclear, said another expert. I love this quote. "This is another finding of unknown significance, but it is a finding." That's something, isn't it? That's what his comment is. This is another finding of unknown significance, but it is a finding, said Dr. Gary J. Kennedy, Director of Geriatric Psychiatry at the Montefiore Medical Center in New York. None of us know why these higher primates don't get Alzheimer's disease, but then we don't know why humans get Alzheimer's disease either. Where it leads us, I don't know. So there's another breakthrough. Let's see. I think before going on, I think I'm going to turn it over to our legal beagle, Leslie Hamilton. And with Leslie now, she's going to talk to us about animals and the law today. And Leslie, take it away.
Thank you, Rick, and good evening. Welcome back to Animals in the Law Today. This evening, I'm going to dedicate my few minutes to talking to you again about the large number of puppy mills that we have in Wisconsin and a law that's currently pending in the Wisconsin legislature that will regulate puppy mills. It's estimated about 1,300 what would be characterized as puppy mills here in Wisconsin, and that is usually someone who is breeding or selling dozens, if not hundreds, of dogs. Usually the dogs are very, very poorly taken care of. As a matter of fact, their care probably violates Wisconsin's criminal code regarding the care of animals. Just last week, on May 20th, Richland County lodged charges and filed a criminal complaint against Jennifer Petkus, who is the owner of the Sage and Thyme Animal Ranch, a purported animal sanctuary or shelter care facility for animals in Richland County. The investigation was initiated and for the most part carried out by an outside agency outside the state of Wisconsin. The Humane Society of the United States and the ASPCA teamed together to come in. Actual undercover investigation was done by one of Dane County Humane Society's veterinarians, and their executive director, Pam McLeod-Smith, went into the Sage and Thyme Animal Ranch with a hidden camera and microphone and took notes and filmed the horrible conditions that over 400 animals were living in various buildings, even in a car located on the property. When they went in March and February of this year, they visited the facility or the property when the temperatures were as low as 25 degrees Fahrenheit and found animals of every size and breed of dogs and cats living in their own feces in wire cages. The animals were circling, which indicates that they're essentially losing their minds due to their confinement. All of the water bowls that were provided to the animals in these unheated barns and vehicles, all of the water was frozen. Few of them had food. And some of the other allegations that are included in the complaint that was filed last week by the Richland County District Attorney's Office are available online at nowisconsinpuppymills.com. That complaint I've been able to obtain a copy of, described as an animal with a broken leg that had not been treated, and the animal had an ulcerated callus on the brake, indicating the animal had been walking on the broken leg for quite a long time. The witnesses observed thick layers of fecal matter and soiled newspapers when the owner, again Jennifer Petkus, would go into the facility. She would simply layer more straw or more newspapers on top of the feces that were in the cages, creating an incredibly disastrous situation for the health of these animals, in that the air had such a high ammonia content. It burned the nose and eyes of the people who went into the buildings despite the very cold temperatures in the buildings. Many of the smaller breed dogs were unable to maintain their body temperatures because of their size and the lack of heating. A large number of the dogs had overgrown toenails. Some of the animals, their toenails had curved back into their toe pads, and they were unable to walk as a result of that. Some of the animals had ear tips missing, either due to frostbite or injury from other animals. There was a black lab that was noted, very, very thin, missing much of its hair. And Jennifer Petkus claimed that it had cancer, and she was just providing it with hospice care while the dog died. However, when the dog was taken to the Dane County Humane Society and provided with appropriate medical care and food and a clean cage and a bath, it in fact proved to be a healthy, although older dog. Also described is an animal that had maggots living in a wound, an open wound in its ear. A ram was found, a male goat, I think, or sheep, I'm not sure. And the ram's foreleg was missing its fetlock. As a result, its radial bone was exposed and sticking out into the dirt and manure that it was lying on. There also were discovered a couple of carriers for dogs, and in those carriers were the bodies of puppies. Apparently this woman went and picked up the puppies, Freed a Good Home ad or wherever she found them, and then just left them in the carrier. And autopsies of some of the puppies indicated that they simply starved to death while being caged in their puppy carriers. There was also found in the corner of one of the cages several small dogs, clearly emaciated, ribs partially or plainly visible, a little more than skin covering their bones, too weak to even stand up. And then there was one beagle. I don't know how many of you have known beagles in your lifetime, but I don't think you would find a sweeter, more loving dog. Unfortunately, beagles, because they do have such wonderful dispositions, are often the dog of choice for many animal researchers. We have hundreds, if not thousands of them living in Covance here in Madison or at the University of Wisconsin, where they are experimented on a daily basis. Here also there was a beagle who was apparently victimized by many of the other dogs in her wire cage. And she was heavily infested with lice, pressure sores, and also had a large open wound on her back and many puncture wounds all over her body. Now, these are the animals that were rescued a couple weeks ago from the Richland County Animal Ranch known as Sage and Thyme. And as I indicated to you earlier, there is a bill pending in the Wisconsin legislature. It's 2009 Assembly Bill 250. The companion bill in the Senate is Senate Bill 208. It has been introduced. We hope that it will be passed this session. Similar bills have been introduced and failed to pass over the last many sessions of the legislature. The fiscal note on the bill indicates that it will probably cost about $530,000 to administer, but that the fees, license fees and inspection fees that will be collected will more than offset the cost. 6 full-time employees will be hired. I know in these very tough budget times, it's difficult to conceive of a new program being created, but this program will pay for itself as far as dollars are concerned, and certainly will save an awful lot of suffering across the state of Wisconsin, a state, unfortunately, that is known as one of the top 3 states currently in the country for the number of puppy mills. And that is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And back to you, Rick.
Well, that was an encouraging story, Leslie. But I don't know what the big deal is. I mean, they're just property. She could just buy them and sell them anytime she wanted to. I mean, if we'd have gone into her house and found a bunch of toasters or a bunch of books laying around with their pages torn out and damp, why would that have mattered? They're just dogs and cats, aren't they? In this case, just dogs. Maybe she was a graduate from one of the UW animal programs here. I don't know. We should remember that here at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, inspectors have found, in one case, they went in and found an emaciated dog who hadn't been fed properly, was apparently starving to death, was not receiving veterinary care. In another case, we know from a few years ago, a number of cows were allowed to starve to death at one of the university's cattle barns. So while we might think this woman has some sort of mental problem that would cause her to collect animals, not take care of them, we should keep in mind that there's something about the mindset of people, a mentality, a certain personality type or something that basically doesn't believe that animals are their feelings, their experiences, those beings simply don't matter very much. And so things, problems happen. Whenever problems come up at the university, they'll usually say, well, this is a big system, and of course problems are going to occur, but we'll do our best, right? Can you imagine if you were running a school, and a large school, let's say, and periodically children were found perhaps left locked in a closet with nothing to eat? Well, there's a lot of kids here and problems are going to occur. Somebody said something like that, you would think there was something wrong with them and they would be thrown out. They wouldn't be allowed to have control over people like that. Anyway, so I guess my thing that I'm going to talk to you about today sort of falls right in these lines. Are they toasters, or are they in fact individuals with subjective lives? There's a new book that's just been published by an acquaintance of mine, actually, Professor Mark Bekoff at the University of Colorado, and a colleague of his, Jessica Pierce, who I don't know, who's a moral philosopher also at the University of Colorado. And the book that they've just published is called Wild Justice. And they're making the argument in the book, looking at innumerable anecdotes, experiences of researchers, scientific evidence, all sorts of things, that animals, in fact, can tell right from wrong. They do have a sense of morality. I told you a couple weeks ago about the case of Masserman, where they had the monkeys on both sides of the cage. They were shocking them, and the monkeys that had control of the electric shock refused to shock the other monkeys, even if it meant that they weren't allowed to eat. Some of the monkeys went days on end without eating, rather than hurting one of the monkeys on the other side of the cage. Anyway, so there's more and more of this evidence that's coming out. I'm just going to read you from the article. This is from the Telegraph newspaper in the United Kingdom. Scientists studying animal behavior believe they have growing evidence that species ranging from mice, not surprising, we just looked at the fact that here at the University of Wisconsin they just showed that mice have empathy for each other, that species ranging from mice to primates are governed by moral codes of conduct in the same way as humans. Beckhoff and his co-author have compiled evidence from around the world that shows how different species of animals appear to have an innate sense of fairness, display empathy, and help other animals that are in distress. His conclusions will provide ammunition for animal welfare groups. Well, that's why I'm reading this. Pushing to have animals treated more humanely. But some experts are skeptical. Here's a skeptical author, I think, researcher. This happens to be Frans de Waal, who used to be here at the University of Wisconsin. Frans de Waal is now at Emory University. He studies primates there. And Frans de Waal, I think, is let me just tell you just really quickly. Frans de Waal was one of the people, the primary person who wrote about the Vilas monkeys. I have to check my time here. Who were at the Vilas monkeys who were secretly used in all of the experiments. And Frans de Waal didn't have the moral fortitude to say that what was going on, the violations of the written records that it was unethical. De Waal says that, I don't believe animals are moral in the sense we humans are. He says, rather that human morality incorporates a set of psychological tendencies and capacities in animals such as empathy, reciprocity, a desire for cooperation and harmony. So he agrees that those characteristics are the same in both of us. Let me just go through a couple of I thought, really interesting sorts of things from the book. During play, dominant wolves will handicap themselves by engaging in role reversal with lower-ranking wolves, showing submission and allowing them to bite, provided it's not too hard. Beckhoff argues that without a moral code governing their actions, this kind of behavior would not be possible. If an animal bites too hard, it will initiate a play bow and to ask forgiveness before play resumes. Experiments with domestic dogs, where one animal was given a treat and another denied, have shown that they possess a sense of fairness as they shared their treats. I love this story about elephants. In 2003, a herd of 11 elephants rescued antelope who were being held inside an enclosure in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. The matriarch, her name is here, Eleanor. I wonder if she knows that people call her Eleanor. The matriarch unfastened all the metal latches holding the gates closed and swung the entrance open, allowing the antelope to escape. Isn't that something? Diana monkeys. A laboratory experiment trained Diana monkeys to insert a token into a slot to obtain food. A male who had grown to be adept at the task was found to be helping the oldest female who had not been able to learn how to insert the token. On 3 occasions, the male monkey picked up tokens she dropped and inserted them into the slot and allowed her to have the food. As there were no benefits for the male monkey, Beckhoff argues that this is a clear example of animals' actions being driven by some internal moral compass. Chimpanzees. A chimpanzee known as Knuckles from the Center for Great Apes in Florida is the only known captive chimpanzee to suffer from cerebral palsy, which leaves him physically and mentally handicapped. Scientists have found that other chimpanzees in his group treat him differently, and that he's rarely subjected to intimidating displays of aggression from the older males. Chimpanzees also demonstrate a sense of justice, and those who deviate from the code of conduct of a group are set upon by other members as punishment. Experiments with rats have shown that they'll not take food if they know their actions will cause pain to another rat. This is just like the Masterman studies. In lab tests, rats were given food, which then caused a second group of rats to receive an electric shock. The rats with the food stopped eating, rather than see another rat experience the shock or receive the shock. Similarly, mice react more strongly to pain when they've seen another mouse in pain. There was a study, it's not mentioned here, there was a study in Comparative Medicine, a journal that looks at, it's a lab animal journal. And what they did was they monitored heart rates in mice when they went into a room with mice, and when the mice witnessed decapitation of other mice, their heart rates raced. When people came into the room, their heart rates raced. They said that this was, even the researchers said that this was a sign of empathy in the mice. Recent research from Switzerland also shows that rats will help a rat to which it's not related to obtain food if they themselves have benefited from the charity of others. This reciprocity was thought to be restricted to primates. Whales have been found to have spindle cells in their brain. These very large and specialized cells were thought to be restricted to humans and other great apes, and appear to play a role in empathy and understanding the feelings of others. But obviously, if there's other animals that are experiencing empathy, then perhaps these large cells aren't that holy grail of empathy. But in any case, humpback whales, fin whales, killer whales, sperm whales all have been found to have spindle cells in the same areas of their brains. They also have 3 times as many of these special cells compared to humans, and are thought to be older in evolutionary terms. This finding has suggested that complex emotional judgments, such as empathy, may have evolved considerably earlier in history than previously thought, and could be widespread in the animal kingdom. Now, there was a time, why does any of this matter? There was a time, of course, that only white males who owned property were thought to have rights, and everybody else they could be treated as they wanted to by those rights-holding white males with property. Speaking of Western society here, of course. In other societies, it was males, property-owning males, whether they were in Africa or Japan or wherever else. But throughout time, what we've seen is that we've slowly come to acknowledge that others that have that have the same feelings that we do deserve the same rights. And so that's why we think that animals have rights. And so remember that the dogs and the cats and the monkeys are just like you. The chickens and the cows and the geese are just like me. We all just want to live happy and free. The dogs and the cats and the monkeys are a lot like you. The chickens and the cows and the geese, they're a lot like me. We all just want to be, we all just want to be, we all just want to live happy and free.